benefits and challenges that you see coming out of a global life?
Definitely. There's a long list of benefits, so I'm just going to focus on a few. I think one of the most interesting benefits that comes from growing up abroad is creativity. So there's actually pretty good research out there, actually excellent research out there on people who lived abroad, not travel, but actually really lived internationally, tend to be more creative. And that doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to become artists or musicians, but that they think creatively. So they're excellent problem solvers. They can solve problems from multiple perspectives, which is, it is such an important skill. And these days it's required more and more in the economy and to solve some of the larger problems. So that's one of my favorite things.
And are you just talking about cultural skills, or are you talking about broader skills?
These are really what we will call in education soft skills. So there are hard skills like your maths and your science and that sort of thing. And then there are soft skills, which are sort of skills that you can use in any field that are based on sort of social emotional intelligence. And those are really important. That's actually what economists, educators, psychologists, multinational companies will all agree. That's what they're looking for in people, strong soft skills, and they're actually not that easy to find. So TCKs really have a leg up as far as like competition in the workforce. So that's one of them. Adaptability. So, whether your child has moved every 2 years, or maybe they've moved once or twice, but they've had a lot of shifting, friends come in and out, different schools, etc. They learn how to adapt quickly. And when you think about like technology changing so quickly, like they say that when you become a freshman at university these days, by the time you graduate, 40% of the jobs that existed when you were a freshman don't exist. So, the economy is changing so quickly. So if you can be adaptable and just run with it and not be terrified of change, again, you've got a leg up. So that's another one. I think there's some real obvious things like language skills. So if you can speak more than one language, I mean, that's incredible. There's all kinds of, that provides a sort of cognitive strength for your child. And again, it helps with finding a good career and that sort of thing.
Sorry, I was going to say one of the things we talked about before, and I know we've talked about it in terms of specifically my daughter, actually. I feel I should trot people in and out. But that it's not just the language itself, the ability to speak the language, but the ability to speak the nonverbals and the cultural language, so that they're making the right calls.
Cross-cultural communication. So even if you haven't, like you could be at a party and you meet someone from another culture and maybe you don't know anything about that culture, but you immediately know that you should be paying attention to the body language and reading their cues and then trying to mimic what they're telling you is important to them. So whether it's like physical space or it's, not doing an American thing and like going in for a big bear hug, whatever it might be, just really reading that. That's so important. So that's another one. I would just say that the key for all of these is that I don't believe that these things just passively come to your kids because they live internationally. You have to be a little intentional about it. So, and a lot of times international schools are pretty intentional about it, but parents can be intentional about it as well. So if you're living in a foreign country with a different language, really encourage them to learn that language. Help them explore the cultures that they're living in, learn about the government, the values, the religions, etc. So they're having a really deep learning experience.
Actually, because one of the things I was going to bring up was that I noticed that my children are open to things. It's not that necessarily they're less biased, but they seem to have this openness both to, for instance, where you go to college, there isn't this sense that you've got to go in state or out of state, or it's just they can go somewhere. They're not really worried. But also in terms of experiences with people with sort of new experiences, other cultures, whatever, that they're very open to, and when they get there, they're watching and learning and observing rather than sort of automatically. And a lot of the time there's a fear involved with it. It's very different. And actually my co-author on Finding Home Abroad, Tricia Carter, who's the CI Collective, she uses the phrase, and we use it in the journal a lot. It's not right or wrong, it's just different. And I think actually a lot of TCKs, if they have been exposed to different experiences, they're okay with that.
That's a core part of who they are.
It's just different.
Definitely.
It's not threatening. I think is.
Just a side note, I've noticed that in my career, I never put two and two together until a few years ago, to be honest. but And a lot of my jobs.
Just have to get a better expert.
Oh no, already. But so in multiple places in my career, I've been placed, it wouldn't be in my job description, but they would say all of a sudden, if they were having like an issue where two different groups, like cultural groups at the company weren't getting along, you know, they'd pull me in to try and bridge the differences. Or yeah, if there was like conflict that involved culture or difference, I was often put on some committee to resolve that. And I just thought, I don't know. I don't know why they're doing that. I mean, I enjoy it. But then, you know, when I think about it, I think it's really because difference has always been part of my life. And a lot of times I've been the one that's the most different. So it creates also a little bit of empathy. You know, you have a little bit of empathy for people that might be misunderstood, you know, just for cultural reasons.
Actually, for those people, because I know there's a lot of people that follow the Expat Lifeline who aren't necessarily expats now, but might be thinking about it. And one of the things that I would suggest is that you can often have international students to stay with you. And so it's not, you don't have to move yourself. It's, you know, it's about exposing your children to different cultures locally. You know, we imagine that we've got to move and then expose them locally, but often, you know, it's a global world now, and there's a lot of people, there's a lot of different cultures that they can be exposed to, sort of even before you're starting to move, so that they start in a comfortable environment.
It's a good idea. It's like training wheels.
Yeah.
It's a good idea.
So what about the challenges?
So the challenges, I would just want to say one thing is that no matter where you raise your child, there's going to be positives and negatives. So I just want to be clear about that. As Rachel said earlier, one of the things that unites us is that we have a very positive perspective on this international experience. So,
and if you're expecting it to be entirely positive, you might want to turn off.
Let's be realistic. Okay, so challenges. So there are some challenges with all of the moving. So if you move every few years, there's that, or maybe again, you've only moved a couple times, but you're in the international community. So a lot of people around you are moving. You're going to find, you know, there's a lot of losses in your child's life. So just, you know, friendships that have to end sometimes unexpectedly. So unwanted ends to friendship. You know, they have to leave schools that they may have become attached to. They have to leave cultures that they may have become attached to. In like the education psychology world, you call it social capital. And so kids sort of lose their social capital, you know, each time they move, they have to rebuild it again. So, so anyway, we'll talk about how you can deal with that in a healthy way, but just all those goodbyes can sort of add up. When TCKs become adults, you might find that they have some relationship issues, which we'll talk about, I think, a little bit more later. But because they don't get the practice of having, like if you have a friend for 10 years that you get to see, you know, every week of your life as you're growing up, you practice friendship. Like, you know, you're a little bit better at dealing with conflict because you can't run away. Maybe your friend lives down the block and you have to see her. So, but in the international community, you know, you can sort of opt out on some of the more difficult parts of friendship, and just because of your circumstances. And so when you become an adult, you don't always know how to sort of have an intimate friendship or to be vulnerable or to deal with conflict. A lot of times, you know, people will just deal with that by just walking away. So that's the other thing.
I would also say that families come into that, because you haven't got access to cousins and people that you don't get to choose. They are your family. And so I think that's one of those places you typically fight with your cousins,
and then you still have to be related to them.
Yeah, and you still get to see them again next Christmas.
Yes,
so that's
true.
That I think is one of the keys.
Absolutely.
Growing up in a sort of very close extended family, we practiced a lot of things on each other.
Yeah, that's like
physical violence. All of those things. But that to me would be that's one of the things that I'm really conscious that my children have lost. And so one of the things we do is try to replace those sort of same scenarios where you have to get on with the people that we spend a lot of time with.
Absolutely. Yeah. The other thing I would just say for challenges is, for some kids, especially if they haven't developed, maybe they're not the best communicators, or maybe they haven't had a lot of healthy goodbyes, they might experience depression or anxiety, especially around during transition times, transitions are hard for anybody in the world. So there's that. But especially if they are, let's say, transitioning back to their quote unquote home country, so like in your case, maybe if your kids go back to Wales, I mean, they haven't lived in Wales in a very, very, very long time.
Yeah, since like 10 years.
Yeah. So, you know, that would be a transition for them. And so when kids don't have certain coping strategies or other adults in their lives outside of their parents, it can be really challenging. And for some kids, it can manifest as depression or anxiety. And there aren't really good stats on that for the TCK expat world, but anecdotally for the people that work in the field, it seems like it's a little bit higher than like your monocultural
liking the
kids.
Yeah. One of the things we talked about